Morena, everybody. Sorry for the slight delay. We've had a bit of a reshuffle around in the council chambers. So I would like to welcome everybody to this council meeting of the 28th of July 2022. Now, we've got a little procedural matter. The Mayor has been called away briefly this morning, and the Deputy Mayor is also away on official business. So in the absence of both of those, we have to, under Standing Orders 3.1, we require all members present to elect a chairperson for standing in for the Mayor and Deputy Mayor. And so we just have to put that, there's no resolution or anything to be screened? No, just that somebody could move and somebody so can we move that I'll be in the hot seat this morning as chairperson? So moved by Councillor Compton and seconded by Councillor Hanford. Thank you very much. All those in favour say aye. All those not. Oh, sorry, a question from Councillor Randall. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Buswell. I thought it was Councillor Holbrook there, but I was actually going to nominate Councillor Hanford, but it's all been decided, so my objection is now withdrawn.
Okay, thank you for that comment, Councillor Randall.
We also have Councillor Provanov raised her hand as well.
Councillor Provanov, I have a question from you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to check to see if we actually have a quorum. And how many people are actually above the how many councillors we are above the quorum?
Sure. So so what we can do is we can go into apologies and we can then ascertain who's here and who's not. We have got Councillor Coots, McCann, Randall, Provanov and Elliott all online. Councillor Elliott is a slight lateness, apology of lateness, and the only absence we have is Mayor Guru and the Deputy Mayor Janet Holborough. We have Sophie Hanford in the chambers. We have Councillor Halliday and Councillor Compton, and we also have Christine Pepps from the Otaki Community Board.
Thank you. So the quorum is based on all councillors.
Hang on a second, please. And we also have Christine Hapita from Nahapu Otaki at the table.
So I'm just clarifying that the quorum is based on councillors, whether they're on Zoom or whether they're present in the table and around the council chambers.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so could I call on Councillor Sophie Hanford to do our council blessing to kick things off today?
Sure. Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take kei mua i o mātou aroaro e pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara hua pai mo ngā hāpori i mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia kia whaihua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi mā te mai te tiro whakamua me te hihiri ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotaitanga me te aroha.
Beautiful, thank you very much. Thanks. So apologies. We have apologies, as we've already mentioned, from Mayor Guru and also Deputy Mayor Janet Holborough, and an apology for a little bit of lateness from Councillor Elliott. Can we have a mover for those apologies, please? Moved by Councillor Compton, seconded by Councillor Halliday. All in favour, please say aye. And anybody against? That's carried. Number 4 on our agenda, we've got declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. I haven't been made aware of any. What's that? Councillor Coates has apparently raised his hand. Oh, of course.
Madam Chair, I'm just declaring an interest relating to an item in the publicly excluded agenda, so I will not be participating in that discussion.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have a mover for the declarations of interest related to items on the agenda? Sorry? Do we move them? No movement. Okay. Number 5, presentation of petitions. Haven't been made aware of any. And number 6, hearings. We haven't got any. And number 7, public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. We have one public speaker. They've not come into the Zoom meeting.
Under the circumstances, we'll let you know if somebody does come into the Zoom meeting. Perhaps we could come back to that item at that time.
Okay, I've just been informed by staff that we'll just move through the meeting as our public speaker hasn't come into our Zoom meeting yet. So once they do, we'll slot that in where we can. Number 8, we've got members' business. Now, we have a couple of matters of an urgent nature that have been brought to my attention, and one of them is to be popped into the public excluded meeting. So I'll just run through that. At a later point of the meeting, we will resolve to enter the public excluded part of the meeting, and amongst other matters, we will discuss the appointment of a chief executive. This matter has to be added to the agenda as a matter of an urgent nature that cannot be delayed as per Standing Orders 9.12. The recruitment and selection process has now been concluded, and a preferred applicant has been identified, and it is operationally imperative that this matter is not delayed. And we've got Steffi. And we have Steffi just to talk about the reasons why that goes into.
No, this is for the second matter that needs.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. So that's the first matter that that is going into public excluded as a matter of an urgent nature, and now we have another little bit of urgent nature that we need to attend to, and this is really exciting. It's to do with our iwi rep for the standard. Here we go. It's the appointment of a Ngāhapua iwi rep for our Strategies and Operations Committee. So we're going to, we've been given the name of Kim Tawiri as a Ngāhapua of Ōtaki representative. She has recently been confirmed, and will and Council would like to formalise this to give effect to the Council's decision.
Sorry, it's not touchscreen.
Council decision on the 7th of June 2022 to enable greater mana whenua participation in Council committee as subcommittees where appropriate, to take advantage of the next few months remaining in this triennium. So I would like to welcome Kim to the table. She is very familiar with us. She's been very involved in lots of things that we've been doing around the council table. So it will be lovely to have her as a formal appointment to the Standard and Operations Committee. Do we have to pass a resolution? Do we have to?
When we get to it, yes.
Okay. Right, so that's all under the matters of an urgent nature. So now we can go on to members' business. Sorry, that was members' business. Now we'll go on to Mayor's report. We don't have any. And our first report, I would like to call up Sarah Watty to speak to the iwi representative being appointed.
Kia ora koutou. So further to the item on the agenda, which cannot be delayed, around the appointment of Kim Tawiri as Ngā Hapua Otaki's representative, we're wanting to formalise that, and so we've put together some resolutions to give effect to that decision of Ngā Hapua Otaki. So if Fiona, would you be able to pull those resolutions up? Thank you. Apologies, we've just got a name, so we're wanting to make sure that we can formalise this as soon as possible, given there are only a few months left in this triennium.
And I was so excited about it that I just pushed it right up the top of the meeting. So bear with us to push that through.
Just while we're getting the resolutions up, so we're still, the iwi partnerships team is still liaising with our other iwi representatives about proposed names, and those discussions are ongoing. So we don't yet have a name for our other iwi representatives, but hopefully that will be forthcoming. So you can now see up on the screen the proposed resolutions. So I'll just read them through. So that the council agrees to appoint Kim Tawiri as Ngā Hapua Otaki's representative to the Strategy and Operations Committee, with full voting rights effective from 28th of July 2022 today until the end of the 2019 to 2022 triennium. So it is just to the Strategy and Operations Committee at this stage. Ngā Hapua Otaki are still discussing the possible appointments to other committees and maybe forthcoming with other names. So then the second resolution notes that Kirsten Hapita and, oh sorry, there's a typo there, apologies. It's Kim's, yes. It's in H, is it? Is that, Thiri. Yep. Oh, IWI. Apologies for that. Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to make the other thing work. So what needs to change?
So it's just the spelling of Kim's surname, which should be Tahiwi. Apologies, that's my error in putting this together in a hurry. Yes, that IWI at the end instead of R, it's W. That's correct now, isn't it? So we'll come back to the second resolution. So notes that Kirsten Hapeta and Denise Hapeta or Kim Tahiwi will continue to represent Ngā Hapua Otaki as the Te Whakaminenga o Kapiti representative, attending council meetings, workshops and briefings until the end of the triennium. And lastly, notes that to confirm this decision, council will liaise with Ngā Hapua Otaki to arrange a letter of appointment to be signed between Kim, Denise and Kirsten and council, which is just to formalise matters like confidentiality, etc., so that we all know what the expectation is there.
That's great, thank you, and thank you for doing that at speed in the circumstances. Can I open it to questions? Has anyone got any questions relating to the appointment? Otherwise, we'll move that we accept the resolution today. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Sophie Hanford, and someone to second, please. Thank you, Councillor Gwyn Compton. Thank you, Sarah, for that. Oh, sorry. All those in favour say aye. All against? And that's carried. Thank you. Have we got an is that an abstention from you, Councillor Randall? Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's passed. Thank you very much. And now we'll go on to report number 10.1. Thank you, Sarah.
Just to make you aware that the public speaker has now entered. So if we wanted to come back to that now, we could. Otherwise, you can decide to do it at a different time.
Okay, let's go back to public speaking. We're all over the place this morning, and I apologise for that. So I would like to welcome Kevin Burrows to the to our meeting via Zoom. Welcome, Kevin. The joys of technology. While we're waiting for that, I'd also like to welcome Gary Simpson, our acting CEO. He's also on Zoom with us today. We're all good to go? Okay, welcome, Kevin.
Hi. Thank you.
You've got 3 minutes to talk to us today. Nice to hear.
Okay, I'll be as brief as possible. I understand this morning you will be discussing the amendment to the district plan regarding building heights around Kapiti. Sorry. While I completely understand the reason, the housing reason and the desperate shortage of housing here, I would ask the council, when considering this amendment, to bear in mind residents that are already in Kapiti. I live down Kapiti, Paraparuma Beach, and I have a beautiful view of Kapiti Island, for instance. To put a 6-storey building in front of that would just ruin my view, quite frankly, and probably lower the value of the property also too. So what I would ask is that when you're considering these plans, you look at down the beach, keeping things at 3 or 4 stories, then as you move higher, moving them up to 6 stories. That would give everybody a view of the of one of the major attractions in Kapiti, actually. That's it really, about considering those heights and the residents that are already here too, because lots of them have bought the places because of the view. That's been a deciding factor when buying a property. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I will open it up for questions. We've got a question from Councillor Gwyn Compton.
Thank you, Kevin. Through the chair, I guess my question is, why do you think that view should be sacrosanct like that? I mean, surely you accept that Kapiti has to change. That's the direction we've been given by the government. So to try and stifle that, to preserve view shafts, as we've seen up in Auckland, would be on very shaky legal ground. So I guess my question to you would be, what's more important, homes for people or views of an island?
Oh, I've never said it's sacrosanct. I said that you take in consideration for people there. Yes, there is an important issue about housing. I accept that completely. What I'm asking is that you also consider the housing that's already there and the reason that they have bought that, and the property values.
a follow-up question, if I may?
Sure.
It's a follow-up question. I guess property values are part of the reason why the government has mandated these changes and that people cannot afford to live in Kapiti. So are you familiar with the work that the council has done around the housing needs assessment that showed that actually the median rent and the median property price for buying a home in Kapiti is actually out of reach? I think it's for something like 70 or 80% of people who live here, and it's placing them under extraordinary financial stress. Were you familiar with that housing assessment and its findings?
I am familiar with that. I have seen the report.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a further question from Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Madam Chair. Look, my question is actually in relation to what you're talking about. Are you talking, just for some clarity there, are you talking about the 6 stories that are being proposed for the, should we say, the Paraparaumu Beach and Ramati Beach areas specifically, as in for, should we say, blocking the views? They're being classed as town centre zones. Is that correct? Or
yes, well, so, yeah, that's the one I have the experience with. That's why I'm talking about that.
Do you, a follow-up question, do you think it's more reasonable that they should be perhaps 4 stories rather than 6 stories, or are you thinking even lower?
3 or 4 stories.
Okay, because I just do note that is the size for the local centre zones. But I do share your concerns about the heights on those particular locations, but thank you very much for bringing it up. Oh, and sorry, just one other clarifying point. You're aware that this process is going out for submissions at this stage?
No, I wasn't quite too sure what the process is going to be. I was told by council staff.
Just going to clarify that with staff. This is going out as part of a submission process, isn't it? Yeah. So you'll be able to submit into the submission process with regards to your concerns.
Okay, right. Thank you for that, Councillor.
And we have a question from Councillor Pravanov via Zoom.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Mr. Burrows, thank you for coming along and speaking today. So my question sort of follows up generally from Councillor Compton. So part of this intensification of housing is for affordable housing. Do you think that the area that you live in, for example, I'm hearing your concerns, but do you consider that the area that you're considering should have slightly different criteria, is actually going to provide affordable housing given the cost of land to start off with and the potential cost of building in such a zone?
Sorry, could you? I'm not quite so sure what you're asking.
So the price of a property and houses in a coastal area tend to be quite high. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So by building more intensive houses in such an area, do you think they're actually going to provide cheap housing for Kapiti residents?
I'm not quite so sure, quite frankly, whether it would provide cheap housing. I would never use the word cheap housing. I would use the word affordable housing. Yeah.
So what do you consider to be an affordable price?
Oh, affordable price is usually based on a person's income, and I think the international standard is around about 30% of whatever their income is that they spend on either rent or a mortgage or whatever.
Thanks for those
questions.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I would also maybe just like to ask, Kevin, have you reached out to the property developer that is in your vicinity? That is
no, we've not yet.
Okay, because that might be an opportunity to really understand what might be built in and around you, just where you're currently situated. Yeah. Thanks for your question.
Well, I understand there's a 6-story hotel going in front down there on the beach, Now, that's not housing, that's an hotel, and that will certainly block the views of a number of people, me included.
Okay, thanks for joining us today, Kevin. I might just recommend that you stay on the line and carry on watching the meeting, because this will come up. There might be some of your questions answered within the report given by staff later on in the meeting. So hang in.
Yeah, I have an appointment I have to get to shortly. So.
All right. Well, you can go back and.
Well, I'll stay on as long as possible.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Nice to hear from you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to reports. 10.1, submission on the Water Services Entity Bill. Okay. It's just been brought to my attention that we do have an amended motion. That the staff will pop up on the screen for us.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to the paper.
Okay, we'll just.
And then procedurally, you can move to the
all right.
To the proposal to add that additional resolution.
Yeah.
So the paper, now we possibly have Sue Mon online talking to this. No, okay, that's me. So the paper is really a submission into the Water Services Bill that is before government at the moment. There was a briefing earlier where we just talked through the proposed submission. The submission's closed on Friday, so the paper you have is retrospective, I guess, in terms of the submission itself, although there will be an opportunity to talk to the paper. We've asked for that as part of the submission, so if there is anything else that people think isn't clear or isn't raised in the paper, then that gives another opportunity to do that, or even to provide, I guess, further information into that process as well. So I haven't got anything specific to add to the paper, although I'm aware that there were a number of submissions on the proposal, into the thousands, I think, in terms of the numbers that were provided. Tens of thousands, I think. That taxpayer unit put 66,000 submissions in. So I'm not quite sure how they might work through hearing those, but anyway, that's the paper. So happy again to answer questions.
Have we got any questions on this report? It looks like we've got Councillor Coates via Zoom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Point 20 of the report notes that Council did not directly engage with iwi on this submission. Is there any reason why not, given the involvement of iwi in the proposed three waters and the importance of the topic both to them and to our community?
In terms of why not, maybe a function of the time associated with that. We certainly have flagged those issues within the submission that we were aware of.
All right, and has there been any opportunity for Council itself to meet with iwi to discuss the Three Waters proposal or the submissions for the bill? Like, has Council had any direct, councillors in the governance body had any direct discussions with iwi in terms of hearing their views?
I'm not aware of any, but that would be possibly a question for the Mayor as well. I'm not able to answer that specifically on behalf of the councillors. But again, I'm not aware of any as at an officer's level.
I guess the question is, no opportunities been provided by the organisation?
James, I've just got Kirsten Harpeter that would like to contribute. Oh, hang on. Yep.
Tēnā tātou. I can let you know that the council did approach us to have a discussion about it, and we haven't been able to have that discussion yet.
Madam Chair, could I clarify when Kirsten refers to the council, she's referring to officers. My question was around an opportunity for the governance body to have a corridor with our iwi partners around their views around the Three Waters proposal and the Water Services Entity Bill and so forth. I think it might just be important to clarify. I'm assuming Kirsten's response is regards to council officers.
She's just waiting for a red light to go on, James.
Oh, kia ora. Yeah, it was an informal discussion, and it was quite a while ago, and pretty sure it was the CE at the time.
Thanks, Kirsten.
Thanks, James. We've got a question from Councillor Gwyn Compton.
Thank you. Through the chair, I guess this is slightly more broader on Three Waters. The government obviously announced a pool of $44 million last week, to assist councils with issues around the transition, and I think the minimum amount a council would get is $350,000. I guess, do we know how much we're potentially going to get out of that fund?
I'm aware of a figure. I think the chief executive may have received the detail there. My understanding is it's in the order of $500,000, but I'd need to confirm that. There was a correspondence that went out, I think, last week. I'm not sure if Gary can add any more clarity to that figure.
No, I can't actually, and rather than take a semi-educated guess, I'd rather come back to you with a more accurate number.
Cool, thank you. And as a follow-up question, I guess, in terms of what those transition costs, well, I mean, how long's a piece of string, I guess, might be the answer to this, but do we know how much that will actually cover of what we're likely to incur in terms of transition costs? Because I imagine in terms of consultants and change management and all those sorts of things, there's a fairly lengthy bill coming our way to help manage the Three Waters, the transition over to the new entity, and there'll be stuff that we have to pay rather than those new entities will.
Certainly, through the chair, I'm aware that Finance had pulled together some figures that were submitted through to DAA, and they're certainly in excess of $500,000, but again, I'd have to source that figure and then I can provide it to you offline or possibly through the meeting if Finance are actually online. But yes, there are costs associated with interacting with the DIA and then working on. There are a number of working groups that we're party to as well. So yes, there will be.
And presumably would be a lot of that's additional capacity we'd be bringing on board for a temporary to cover that period. So it will be in the form of consultants and that sort of thing.
There will be, but there's also, I guess, supporting the transition, because the transitioning through to the new entities will have some significant impact on staff. So it's supporting that process. What does the organisation look like in terms of moving through to that a new structure? All of that work. And again, I'm aware that the chief executive has his hand up. He may be able to add further to that.
In the initial instance, I think we're receiving approximately $320,000 in that order for those additional expenses over the next year. And one of the significant questions that was asked at a recent CES forum was, in the event of redundancies where transitioning, which will tend to be upper level staff, aren't successful, who meets the redundancy costs? Because that could be a significant cost facing councils. And the answer given was initially councils would meet those redundancy costs, but they would be reimbursed at a later stage by the government.
Okay, that's quite interesting, because my understanding was that the Three Waters entities were going to take over all existing staff on their current terms and conditions, but that sounds like that's now changed. So that would be quite interesting if we could get that publicly released, because that's quite a different, proposition to how the government has been selling this so far in terms of the impact it would have on staff? Or are they talking about, I guess, the indirect impacts on staff? No, they're talking about Three Waters staff who we might lose? Well, sorry,
No, the government was clear from the start that staff below a certain level that were wholly engaged in Three Water activities would transfer with no loss of benefits. But it was also clear that at the highest level, there would be a contestable process. And the question of redundancies are much more likely to come in to those staff who are partially engaged. And they can be in a whole range of supporting activities across the council. For example, there may be finance staff who do some Three Waters work. There may be operational staff who do some. There are a number of areas where it is less than certain that you could consider them wholly Three Waters engaged, and those are the people that could potentially be affected. So, on the strength of what we've heard, I don't think it's an accurate reflection to suggest that the position has changed in regard to those people.
Yeah, so it's back to that question of the sort of the overhung costs that we get left with after this, and how that gets all dealt with. So the government creates a problem for us and then doesn't reimburse us fully for the problem they created. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Gwyn. We've got a question from Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just somewhat building a little bit on Councillor Coots's comment there, just around governance, perhaps having a little more understanding on iwi's position around the Three Waters. I'd certainly encourage that as a conversation. I am just curious, and it's actually a question towards Kirsten, whether the DIA, I know that there's been external consultation outside of council with regards to the DIA, talking to Māori in general, whether it be iwi hapu or different areas. But have they had conversations with Ngā Hapu direct in any formal way, or has there been a reaching out to Ngā Hapu with regards to that conversation, or those conversations at all?
Oh, kia ora. Thanks for the question. We have had some iwi representatives attend some workshops. So that came at the invitation, I think it was from one of the regional areas. But I would have to come back to you with more detail about what sort of engagement there's been, and it could have been better. I mean, there could have been more, and yeah, so opportunities for that engagement at governance level would be good. Thanks.
And look, through you, Madam Chair, just clarifying as well, look, we've had workshops ourselves around the council table that's led into the submission processes previously, not particularly this one, but there's been a general building up of council position or our community position in the space, which you've been involved, you'll have been involved in as well. You've been happy with the way that submission, I guess, has been formed with regards to expressing the views generally, as such?
It's a bit of an awkward question because, we haven't been invited to everything. So I did attend one workshop quite some time ago, but I'm not aware of everything that has happened around it. So are we happy with it? Yeah.
I apologise, that might have been an inappropriate question around all that, but that was just more just getting an idea from the perspective. I mean, I'm quite happy with the submission that's been put forward, but I'll discuss that in debate. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Martin. We've got a question from Bernie Randall. I would just like to add that we did have a council briefing with councillors on the 5th of July around this submission. So the majority of the content we are actually familiar with because we had that opportunity to feed into it back on the 5th of July. Thanks, Bernie. Sorry, Councillor Randall.
No, that's okay. You can call me Bernie. I have no objection. My question relates to, we only asked to note this letter, right? But we should have had, I agree with Councillor Coots, we should have had more formal discussion on the letter before it's sent, because I believe the community is opposed to the Three Waters, and I believe this letter could have been stronger in its terms. But that's all I have to say, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that response, Bernie. I think that concern might be highlighted in the change to the resolution that is on behalf of the Mayor. So have we got any further questions around the report? Okay, so let's have a look at the recommendations that... Sorry. Oh, okay. So we'll go ahead with the recommendations. We've got a further recommendation, as I said, put to us on behalf of the Mayor. We're just waiting for that to pop up on the screen so we can all see that. So we've got that resolution up there. The Council notes a submission made to Parliament's Finance and Expenditure Select Committee on the Waters Services Entity Bill attached as Attachment A to this report. That's what we've already seen. And this is the new recommendation. Given the serious concerns raised in our previous submission dated October 2021, opposing the Three Water Reform proposal, this Council notes our continued opposition to the impacts of the reform on Kapiti and further directs that any oral presentation of this current submission to the Select Committee strongly reiterates that position. So that's the new resolution that we've got up there. You want to take them separately? Yep. So we'll take the recommendation A as a separate. Does someone want to? You're going to pass that motion. Move the motion. Sorry, Councillor Gwyn Compton is the mover, and we've got Councillor Hanford as the seconder for that recommendation A. All those in favour say aye. Debate. Sorry, I'm so sorry. We'll head into debate. Let's debate it. Yeah, come on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess what I wanted to say here is, I guess I'm in the rare position, I feel like I'm in the rare position in terms of not just this council, but probably quite a few councils of actually being quite, broadly supportive of what the government is trying to achieve with these reforms. I think there's devil in the detail in terms of issues, and there have been issues that this council has continually highlighted throughout this process. But I'm one of these people who thinks that actually there has to be significant overhauling of the local government sector more broadly, and it's unfortunate the government has got the cart before the horse in this regard. But it is what it is, and you have to play the hand that you've been given. And what I think's been really good is the way that our staff have actually gone about thinking about some of the issues in the Three Waters reforms, and one which I really wanted to highlight, which I think actually drills to the heart of a lot of the objections about this reform, and actually any local government reform, or even the new resource management framework that's coming in. And it's about how do you ensure that local voice comes through in these big entities. Now, obviously, we've made some recommendations about how that might be addressed in terms of the way that the entities are required to engage with communities in a way that's familiar to local government. But I think there's that broader question of how these entities actually engage with local government itself. And we've made the point in the submission that actually the boards of these entities need to have some expertise in local government, because when you think about water infrastructure and you think about local government's principal role, which is as a place-making entity, you cannot make communities for people to live in and to thrive in without water infrastructure, without drinking water, without wastewater, and as I painfully noticed on my morning runs in the last couple of days, without stormwater infrastructure. And this is one of the things, you can't have these giant entities that span, in the case of the entity that will be in, will span from Tasman in the South Island all the way up to East Cape. That's a huge area for that entity to cover. And I think there's big questions about how it's actually going to make sure it engages with all our district plans, with all our growth strategies, everything that we have going on in Council's role as the principal placemaking decision point for local government. Now, that's going to change slightly with Resource Management Act reform, and I think that's where I think the government's maybe pushed the boat out a bit far, and maybe they should have gone for 14 entities that aligned with the new regional plans and those sorts of things that are coming under resource management reform. But actually, we've put some really good suggestions in terms of how they can address this. And I guess I'm one of these people who say, I don't want to see this opportunity to reform get thrown out with the we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater on this. I do want to see the government press on with it, but I want to see them keep listening and actually keep hearing and making changes in response to the, actually good faith feedback that councils are trying to give them. Kapiti, I think, is in a good place that we haven't been one of those councils that's gone for the very knee-jerk reaction that we've seen in other areas, and some of that, I think, has, boiled down to actually quite racist objections to what's being proposed. And, Kapiti has steered well clear of that, because I think we're a council that has, we've had a good history in terms of working towards co-governance, and we're taking much, greater leaps in that space now. So I think we've made, we're an exemplar in terms of our management of Three Waters. We're an exemplar in terms of where we're taking our relationship with our EB partners. And I think that's a message that we can show to the rest of the local government community, that actually, this area is not scary. You can do it better. And actually the government needs to look at it as well and say, actually, there are some ways you can make this Three Waters reform better. You can make it more responsive to what communities want going forward. So I think I really commend staff for the immense work they've done under hugely demanding circumstances, and the government making up their mind on things before they actually consult with us, and all these issues they've played out. They've done a superb job in terms of drilling down into the detail of this and coming up with some really robust submissions. And I'm a bit of a cynic in terms of select committee processes and what changes we'll see, but I think we saw at the LGNZ conference in terms of the Prime Minister's speech to there that you can see there is a bit of pressure coming on the government in terms of what they're feeling about the reform process and how that's hurting them. So hopefully that they sort of respond to that in a positive way and, come up with some good changes that come out of submissions like ours.
Thanks, Councillor. We've got Councillor Coates. Sorry, Councillor, we can't hear you in the chambers. Just a minute. I might have to stop my screen share for now. Sorry, let's try that again, Councillor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks. Sorry.
You missed my amazing introduction. Look, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Compton had said in his right of introduction, and I think broadly as a council, as elected members, we have said that change is needed, more for some councils than others. But what we've seen is the government doing a terrible job in terms of the rollout and the process of Three Waters. And I think my concern is that just because the government has doesn't mean that that we add to that too. And for me, a critical step in this whole process has been missed, and that is involving our community. And time again, myself and other elected members have sought to seek views from the community. I've raised it numerous of times along the way, and I know that other elected members have as well. Madam Chair, you referenced the briefing that this paper was discussed in. I again raised it in that briefing and via email afterwards. And it was rather frustrating to be told that it's too late. And why it's frustrating to be told that it's too late was because when I raised it previously, I was told it was too early. And I can go back and cite the different dates and times that I've raised the question of seeking the views of our community. Now, I have no doubt that it probably wouldn't change the outcome. The government seems pretty hell-bent on doing what they want to do. But at least we asked. And at least we'd go into this with an informed submission, and we'd given the community the opportunity to tell their elected representatives what they thought. And we haven't done that. Many councils around the country have done that. There are numerous councils that have conducted very simple surveys, not expensive consultative processes, but just very simple surveys that then helped inform the way that they responded to the government. So whilst I don't disagree with a lot of what is in the submission that's already been submitted, for me it is difficult to support it knowing that we haven't, despite the repeated requests, sought the views of our community. I'm also, I find it difficult that as a governance body we haven't had the opportunity to hear firsthand from our iwi partners what their views are. I know from discussions that I've had that they're broadly in support of the principles, and I understand why, but it would be certainly helpful for the governance body to be more informed around those views when signing off on submissions and so forth. So we've heard from the hapu today. I don't think anyone around the table can convey what Te Atiawa's views are or Ngāti Toa's. And I certainly would have appreciated the opportunity to have that corridor with our iwi partners to help inform council's position. And as Councillor Compton has said, address some of those or some of that misinformation. I think he referred to it as many racial comments, which I think is referencing of that is accurate. But I would add to that a lot of misinformation as well that's fueled part of this debate. So for me, there's an element of this missing. And so I struggle to support it knowing that we haven't taken that step to hear from our iwi partners personally and also our community.
Thanks, James. We've got Councillor Henford.
I was just going to say, yeah, what Councillor Compton said, really, like just a really awesome kōrero, I think, reflecting my thoughts at this point in time anyway on where things are headed, and also just to thank staff for a very clearly laid out submission and continuing to be really constructive in the way that we engage in this conversation, because yeah, there is a lot of kind of anger, hurt, misinformation, racism, a lot of kind of targeted attacks and quite nasty things being said in relation to an issue and an opportunity which is actually just seeking to, as Councillor Compton mentioned, provide better outcomes for our community. That's the intention behind this. And if there are ways that we can, from our perspective, suggest that things are done better, so our community is better reflected and we capitalise on those opportunities to have co-governance and to achieve better outcomes, then if we engage constructively, I think that's great. So I would just like to thank staff for what was a really well laid out submission, and having those clear recommendations was really cool to see. So I'm completely with Councillor Compton in that there are some huge opportunities but also some big sticking points that we're constantly hearing again and again. And so if we continue to engage constructively, I think that's really the only avenue we kind of have at this point in time. So thanks staff for taking every opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Sophie. We've got Martin Halliday, Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm not going to do anything other than endorse what's been said before, because I agree with it completely. We're in a very difficult position, obviously, but it's up to us to be looking after Kapiti Inc. And what we've done, which we've done a very good job. This council's done a very good job with regards to ensuring that we're in a pretty good position. I just wanted to just note that we've just been at the local government conference, and maybe Councillor Hanford would comment on this as well. But I did notice a bit of a change in the in the dialogue, I suppose, with regards to the Three Waters. I felt very much that it was we were being talked at the last conference, whereas I felt there was more of a change, and it was actually with regards to taking on board what local governments put forward and what the submissions have put forward as well. But I do come back to the fact that I think this is, as Councillor Common Sense has been done, a little bit of the cart before the horse. With regards to the big bugbear for me is how this is going to be funded. I still personally think that a wakahi type scenario of a 50-50 split, there needs to be some funding coming from this from central government rather than just the ratepayer. But from regards to the submission, I think it was a good submission, and I was very happy that I think it represented our view very well in this segment of the submission process. But I do certainly endorse all the comments that have just been made.
We've had a recommendation moved in second, and now we've had a debate, and we've got a right of reply to Councillor Compton.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to pick up on some. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we've got Councillor McCann. Sorry about that. It's just popped up. Welcome, Councillor.
Kia ora. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to be a little bit late. Look, I just want to endorse the comments from our fellow councillors around the table. I don't think there's a lot to add to that, but it's just worth noting that I think we are seeing that when change is required, one needs to bring the community with you. And in this particular instance, we have had a process where the ball has been fumbled somewhat and the rules changed because that hasn't been possible. And I think that really undoes what we all know is that there is change that is required. But if you just force change on people without explaining accurately and without over-egging the situation, then you can get some of these very terse debates. So I do thank the staff for putting together a very good submission because we understand that we can't change all the dialogue, but we can from inside the tent. So I'd just like to thank the staff and also thank my fellow councillors for raising all the points, which I think were very valid before.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go back to the right of reply for Councillor Compton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was actually quite fortuitous that Councillor McCann actually raised some of the points he did there, because it sort of ties into what I was going to talk about in terms of what Councillor Cootes said. And a lot of the angst and issues about this come back to the way that the government handled the communications around this, not just with local government, but with broader communities. And, we all sort of focus, I think, in the local government sector on that horrendous advertising campaign they did back in, was it late 2020, where councils would look like we were doing a terrible job with water, and that the government was going to come and ride to everyone's rescues with that. And that obviously got everyone's back up the wrong way. There's a whole lot of issues along the way where the government was constantly telling us that, oh yes, you'll get a chance to go out and formally consult with your communities, we'll give you money so you can go and do that. There's a whole lot of indication that this process was, ironically, would have actually happened sooner, and we would have had more time to do these things in terms of community consultation. But then it ended up that the government had already made up their mind back in June or July of last year in a cabinet meeting. Then they came out and consulted with the sector, having already made up their mind on what they were going to do, which sort of defeated the whole purpose of consultation. And they announced it was going to be mandatory, which wasn't going to be the case earlier. So there was a whole lot of issues that the government basically mucked councils around on. And I think back to the development of our most recent long-term plan, and we did actually ask the community what they thought of the Three Waters reforms then. I guess that was almost too early because there weren't enough details that had come out from the government about them. But we did get sort of an early indication about the community's concerns about as much as we understood at the time. So I think a lot of the blame in terms of the way this is played out does actually sit at the government's feet in terms of how they have handled it. And they have not handled it well. I think LGNZ has come in for some rightful criticism as well in terms of how they position themselves, notwithstanding that they actually do a lot of very good work in terms of advocating for the sector, but they sort of got themselves between a hornet's nest and the people who are quite, I don't want to swear here, quite annoyed about the situation. That would be the very polite way of putting it. But they sort of got themselves in the wrong place there. So, yeah, just when I think about the comments that Councillor Cootes made, they're absolutely spot on in terms of consultation. And the government has mucked us about to the point where it becomes a fait accompli, and you're sort of doing, if you're going out and engaging, it's almost for, I guess, political management more than anything else. But yeah, the government has stuffed this around a lot, so I think it's a really legitimate criticism, and I think one that potentially, I think Councillor Cootes is right, that we should have gone out earlier and undertaken some sort of surveying or that sort of thing earlier in the piece, I'm saying that after that long-term plan consultation where we sort of touched on it there, just to try and get us ahead of that ball. But notwithstanding the fact that actually our council staff have been completely stretched over this and every other reform project that's coming to them, and that's something we get continually told, because actually there's our staff have been poached by the government to help work on these reforms, ironically enough, and then they've got to funnel money back to us to hire consultants to then help us manage these reforms. So it's all a bit of a hilarious merry-go-round if you try and separate yourself from some of the horrendous costs that's being incurred by ratepayers and taxpayers over this.
Thank you for that. So we've done debate, we've done right of reply. Now we'll go and anyone in favour of this recommendation, say aye. We're just checking our Zoom attendance. Okay. And against, we've got Councillor Cootes. So that means that we have passed the recommendation with one objection. Thank you for that. Now we've got recommendation B that has been put forward to us this morning. Have we got anyone to move that recommendation? Anyone on Zoom? We've got Councillor Randall as a mover. Have we got a seconder for that motion or recommendation? And we've got Councillor McCann as a seconder. So we'll open it up for debate for that recommendation. We could just call for a right of... Oh, sorry, I have got Councillor Compton.
Just want to check I'm not jumping the queue from anyone on Zoom? No. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, you've gone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, as I sort of alluded to in the previous recommendation, I'm actually broadly supportive of the reforms, so I won't be supporting this recommendation. And in part of that is we talk about the impacts on our community. And what I think about is, sure, in the short term, we can think that, we have done a justifiably good job in terms of drinking water. We're ahead of our fellow councils just down the road, and covered by Wellington Water in terms of some of the shenanigans that have gone on there. The same goes for wastewater as well. We don't have poo geysers erupting in the middle of our streets like Wellington City so often has, which I don't think Paul Eagle envisages as part of his arts precinct down there going forward. But when I think about some of the big challenges coming up, you only have to look at our last couple of long-term plans to look at how our investment in stormwater in particular has been, escalating very rapidly, and we're finding that it's even more the case as we're dealing with the challenges of climate change. So there's going to be some big gains in Kapiti in terms of the cross-subsidisation we'll get from other regions to help us to deal with our increased costs there. But we're also aware that we're going to have challenges around how we manage our wastewater systems and the way that we process and handle that, not just in terms of the growth we're experiencing, but also consentability of our main existing plant in terms of where the management of wastewater is heading and the preferred ways of handling that. So that's going to be a big challenge and a massive cost coming up. But also drinking water supply as well. We make a big deal about the fact that we've got 20 to 30 years supply sort of, I guess, locked up, and we've done a great job of that in terms of water meters, which was, politically very contentious, but, has demonstrated what a great investment that was, and it's an example to other councils. The river recharge scheme, likewise, has been hugely successful as well. But we actually have all that land set aside for the dam, and I don't know if you followed some of the issues with the Waimea Dam that I think it's, is it Nelson or Tasman Council are trying to build, and the cost blowouts there. So at some point down the line, we're going to have other communities in this wider entity actually helping to pay for our needs as well. And, that all goes back to how do we make sure that our voice gets raised up to ensure that our needs don't get dropped out or subsumed by some of these bigger councils. And that's always an issue that we've seen. The submission raises it really well in terms of talking about regional transport committees and how we're always up against some big areas in terms of competing for that. But I sort of think, there's a real opportunity for us to leverage the sort of balance sheet that's going to be available from this to, when the time comes, to get some of these big projects handled and funded and paid for by other people. And, we think about cross-subsidisation. Kapiti has been the beneficiary of some enormous cross-subsidisation from other parts of the country. Many people enjoy driving in Transmission Gully, and I assure you that taxpayers up in Auckland have contributed to that, same with the expressways. And the other point I'd make is that actually, because so many people in Kapiti commute out of our district to work, and they're going to keep doing that, we actually make use of water networks, through water infrastructures in other parts of this entity as well. So, it's not just what's happening in our little community. We're going to benefit from the work that this does down in Wellington. We'll benefit from the work it does in Porirua. We'll benefit from the work it does in Manawatu. We're not an island. We are all part of this shared, wider, interconnected housing and labour market and recreation market and cultural market. We're all in this together. So I don't think we can sit here and say, oh no, we're not getting our fair share this year, we should throw this out, because over the longer term we will get benefits coming out of this. So for that reason, I'm not going to be supporting the idea that we should continue to have this strong opposition to the impacts of this, because I think there's actually, it swings and roundabouts, and over the short term we might miss out on a little bit, but I think in the longer term there's big opportunities for Kapiti to leverage this reform for the betterment of our community.
Thank you, Councillor. We've got Councillor Martin Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I was going to say that I agree with the way that Councillor Compton succinctly put that, but it was a little more drawn out than that with regards to things. Look, I'm not happy with the way this has gone about, and I don't think a lot of people are, but the status quo is not an option, and the thing is it won't be an option. We're not going to go backwards from where we are necessarily, and we need to be able to be constructive in our voices moving forward. I won't support the motion as such. I think how it's worded doesn't really represent my view about where we're at or where we need to be going moving forward. And I think what is going to be, rather than reiterating anything that Councillor Compton said, just the importance of being a strong voice as a part of the process to inform the government of our concerns and others' concerns as well. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. Thank you.
We've got Councillor McCann.
Kia ora, through you, Madam Chair. Look, I think it's unfortunate that we don't have the Mayor here to inform us as to exactly why he's put this in here. But I would like to suggest that perhaps the Mayor is focusing on the impacts of the reform on Kapiti. And because of that, I'm actually able to agree with Councillor Compton, who is not supporting this motion, because Councillor Compton is correctly thinking about the wider impacts that this reform will have on Aotearoa New Zealand, which is really important. And it's one of the discussions that we've had ongoing, and I think the words I used years ago was it depends on whether we are wearing our Kapiti Inc. hat or our New Zealand hat. I do think that there are some serious flaws in the way this has been rolled out. I see the aggregation is probably not being an area where Kapiti is going to get some advances. And I think one of the things the government hasn't been honest and open about is that the cross-subsidisation that's going to occur is really going to help those councils and those organisations that haven't been funding and investing in their three waters. I do think that we are, in this particular part of the recommendation, focusing on the issues for Kapiti, not the issues for the wider New Zealand. So I do think it creates a real difficulty for our council to plan. It creates some real uncertainty about what's going to occur with some of our senior managers, with those people who are not fully tagged to water. How are we going to keep them on within council without having part of their time become free and perhaps not being able to use? We have very good processes around how long it takes someone to respond to water issues in our region. Are they going to sink to the kind of response levels that we see in Greater Wellington? And to come back to Councillor Compton's point that he correctly raised is how do we ensure our voice is not drowned out? I don't have the answers to any of those, which is why I think it's important that we do say for Kapiti, this is, perhaps not the right direction. But for New Zealand, perhaps it is. And that's where I think the government has got this fundamentally wrong, is by not presenting the water reforms in a holistic manner for the whole of the country and asking us to think about New Zealand as opposed to our regional boundaries. And for that reason, I will be supporting this, because I think our job right now, wearing our hats, is to be looking after our region, perhaps not New Zealand. That is the job of the politicians. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We've got Councillor Coates via Zoom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I won't be supporting this motion. I think I need to be consistent, and the fact that we don't know the views yet. I know there are some in our community that, like Councillor Compton, that do actually support the reform, but we simply don't know what the split of those views are. But more importantly for me, although we've raised some concerns in opposition to aspects of the reform and the impacts of Kapiti, equally, I know there are many aspects of it that iwi support. And so without being able to have that korero with them and have a deeper understanding of their position on this, which Council hasn't had the opportunity to have, it's difficult to make the statement that we have here because iwi are part of Kapiti, and so they're part of this resolution. So I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor. We've got Kirsten Hapeta from Nahapu Otaki.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I'd like to acknowledge the questions that have been raised today around iwi engagement on this. I think you can tell that unlike some of the other agenda items, I don't have enough information to engage in this discussion, and that's quite telling. So for me, this is an opportunity to note that and ask that, I'll just let you know that we would appreciate information and briefings being shared with us so that we can fully engage in it. Thanks.
Thanks, Kirsten. We've got, I'd like to welcome Deputy Mayor Janet Holbrook to the meeting. Welcome, Janet, and you've got a comment.
Yeah, kia ora. I've just joined the meeting. I've just come out of the LGNZ AGM, which I joined online on behalf of the Mayor. So seeing as I haven't had the opportunity to hear the debate on this topic, I'll be abstaining from this vote and I will join the meeting for the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. So we've got the recommendation up, recommendation B. We've had our debate and everything. So we go for. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Bernie moved the motion. Did you want to write a reply, Bernie?
No, I think Councillor McCann has said it all. So I'll waive my reply.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. So all those in favour of the recommendation B, please say aye. And all those against? So we could call for a division since it's a bit of a mixed bag. Oh, we'll get, can we get Sean to call the division?
Certainly, Madam Chair. So I think if we could have those in favour, we have Councillor Randall, Councillor McCann. I'm not aware of anyone else online. Councillor Pravanov. So that's 3 votes for, and those against. Councillor Hanford, Councillor Buswell, Councillor Compton, Councillor Halliday, Councillor Coots, and we have Councillor Holborough, Deputy Mayor, abstaining.
So that recommendation hasn't been accepted. So we'll move on to the next next report, which is report number 10.2, and that is the Stormwater Management Framework. Invite staff up to the front desk. Welcome, Rita, in your offsider.
Hi, I'm sure you all know me, but I'd just like to introduce Caleb Royal, and if do you want to...
Yeah, tēnā rā tātou. Ka mea tō taika mi atu ki a koe, mō tō kaiwhakarite e tēnei ata, he tino pai ki te rongo ki tō kōrero, nā mihi, me ngā hau e whā, nā mihi atu ki a koutou. I'm Caleb Royal, he uri o Ngāti Raukawa, ki te tonga, so engaged with Ngā Hapu o Taki. Yeah, that's me.
And Caleb's been one of the representatives on the Stormwater Management Framework Steering Group. Okay, so I just want to, kind of before we start, there's a bit of an error in the recommendations. I changed it for the rest of the report and then didn't change it in the recommendation at the front page. So the first A1 recommendation is okay, so that's note the feedback received from our engagement with the community. A2 was to adopt the Stormwater Management Framework, Visions, Values and Outcomes as attached in Appendix 1, and there are 4 amendments rather than just 3. So the ones that are listed are correct. There's just one that I modified, one of the clauses in the vision. Clause 4 said communities are thoughtfully planned to be protected from flooding and resilient to anticipated climate change impacts, and that's been changed to current tense. So communities are thoughtfully planned, are protected from flooding, and I've put in it's been put in brackets to an agreed level of service, just to acknowledge that there is a finite point. We can't, yeah. So we went out and we had a chat to developers reps in meetings. We also did bang the table, and we got 30 responses from that. And those responses are, there's 4 themes to those responses. Quite overwhelming was the need to manage existing stormwater problems. So, you know, what are you doing about the flooding that's occurring on my land? Some confusion, I suppose, around the national mandates. Didn't quite understand Te Mana o Te Wai and its implications for local government. The co-governance type arrangements, quite unsure about how that might look like under this framework. And governance arrangements, they wanted a little more, I suppose, front-end consultation with the community, and felt that this process was detracting from our commitment in the current stormwater management strategy around working with affected communities. That has unchanged. We still work with affected communities. So this document is high level, and all the stuff that already occurs in that space will continue to occur. And then there was quite a bit of, I suppose, discussion around how this is actually implemented. And moving forwards, the implementation is what's going to sit underneath it. So we will be coming back with a range of tools and policies and such like, which will actually be fully concentrated with the community. So there's lots more opportunities to get into the detail after this first stage. And Caleb, do you want to?
Yeah, I suppose I just really I've come along to support Rita with the delivery of this paper. The main reason for that is just to let the councillors know that the process that we've gone through to actually get to the Stormwater Management Framework and how we've got to this place. So, you know, we have, as Ngā Hapu Ōtaki, and we've been actively engaged in the development of the Stormwater Management Framework. I sort of, you know, like to congratulate staff and councillors in supporting that. It's been done well. I know that there was also good representation from Te Atiawa and Ngāti Toa in the development of this, and that, you know, there was a strong emphasis to make sure that there was consistency with Te Mana o Te Wai, the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, and that is reflected in the values of the framework that's on the table today. Yeah, so it was really just you know, for us, it was making sure that there was consistency from the legal aspects through the policy and into our management framework on the local level, and making sure that iwi values and community values are well represented in this document. So that's all I was really here to talk about, and happy to take any questions around that as well.
Yes, sir. Yeah, happy to take questions.
Sure. Have we got any questions from the table? Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through the chair, what sort of implications will this framework have, especially because it talks about giving water the space to flow from the mountains through to the sea, on things, initiatives like where we put in stormwater ponds, or say the dam if it ever gets built for water supply? How does it feed into discussions around that, or is that sort of, I guess, getting a bit too far off into the future in terms of the implementation of it?
To be fair, I think water flowing from the mountains to sea is going to happen irrespective of what we do. And it is about balance. And it is, it's one of the overarching principles, you know. Part of giving respect to our rivers and streams and waterways, and even our drainage network, is that actually give it space to move. Quite often in, I suppose, urban areas, our drainage network or the open channel drainage network has been constrained to such a point that, you know, now we're facing increased groundwater levels, increased rainfall, and there isn't actually that space for that water to move. So it's about, I suppose, when we get new developments coming on board, that we're actually mindful of the need of water to actually move from A to B.
That is the most beautiful segue for my follow-up question, was because we've obviously got coming up the plan change in terms of intensification, and there's significant changes in terms of site coverage that come from that. So I guess the question is, presumably because there will be greater site coverage and less permeable ground to absorb stormwater, that's going to, I suppose, lead to design changes in terms of the actual systems, not just in new developments, but actually retrospectively in the rest of the network to compensate not just for that, I guess, the reduced ability of existing lots to absorb stormwater, but actually the increased severe weather events we're getting from climate change and that. So there'll be some quite significant reworking in terms of design specifications and that has to flow out from this.
Yes, it's going to be an interesting space. Just because there's more intensity doesn't necessarily mean there's a bigger footprint. Like if people are going up, stormwater doesn't actually care whether there's multi-stories of it. It's that footprint on the ground, the impervious surface. As I say, there's lots of work falling out from this, and we've started a lot of that stuff. We are rebuilding our flood hazard maps and models to include groundwater and to allow us to be more responsive to changes in the built environment. And we are re-looking at our policy on the hydraulic neutrality, not to get rid of it, but to make it a bit more fit for purpose for these what's coming.
I also think that within the values section there, we've got pukengatanga, which is using that innovation as new technologies come to the fore, that there is that early adoption processes, and that, you know, within Te Mana o Te Wai, the first priority of the water is to the water. So this actual framework looks to prioritise the cleaning of water and looking after the water, as opposed to, is it going to be backyard space? So there is a prioritisation of needing, with future developments, to make sure that actually the prioritisation is cleaning that water, that nature does have the space to exist and to, I suppose, to flourish. Because at the moment she's a little bit choked on some of these things, to be fair.
I think a little bit might be understating it in some cases, isn't it? No, thank you, that was really good.
We've got Jocelyn Pravanov, Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rita and Caleb, for speaking to this paper today. And the changes and the recommendations that have been done. So I certainly welcome one of the new clauses that's been included in the operation, maintenance, upgrade and renewal of our network contributes to a thriving, resilient community and healthy ecosystem. But one of the ones that hasn't been changed, which you alluded to before, was water's given space to flow from the hills to the sea. And no doubt there are a lot of people watching online and will hear this in the media. But I suppose my question is, how do you say that is actually occurring to at least 60 families in the Peka Peka area? Because that is not actually happening, as you all know.
I suppose in the vicinity of the Peka Peka area, there is a natural wetland. It's not necessarily, you know, the ability to flow straight to the sea. There are natural processes in the middle. Do you want to?
Sorry, Councillor, I'm not sure how that question relates to the paper that we have in front of us today. I mean, if that's a specific issue that we're dealing with, this is talking about a management framework in terms of moving forward in terms of the management of stormwater.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. But I suppose my question relates to the vision that has been there, and I suppose this document this framework has been reviewed, and that those vision statements are still there, which is good. But I suppose it's a case of ensuring that it actually does that they're actually enacted upon.
Absolutely, yes. We'll take that point, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jocelyn. We've got Councillor Holborough.
Kia ora. Congratulations to staff on the wonderful outreach that happened and the consultation around this. Certainly enjoyed seeing you at the Paikakariki market, and thank you to Caleb for your part in this. Hugely valuable and appreciated. So what comes out in the paper for me is that there's a little bit of potentially a gap in understanding with some of the higher level principles and some of our obligations under Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and also around the concept of te mana o te wai. In the light of that, are we looking at ways that we can educate and communicate with the public around some of these higher level issues? For instance, videos, information. It seems to me that we've got some useful insights into some of the levels of understanding within our community about some of those higher level concepts.
I totally agree. It did. I pushed the button. Oh. Totally agree. It did highlight. We did a little bit of education, but obviously not nearly enough and as widespread. So there's definitely a gap, and we will be going out with some, because we do need to, bring the community along for the next bit as well. So the background is important.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. We've got Martin. Oh, sorry, we've got Councillor Coates next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Caleb. I just wanted to start by acknowledging your presence within the council chambers and also your involvement within this project. I'm certainly comforted to know that you've been there along the way. So I'm very happy with the paper that's before us. I do have a couple of questions, which I just want to understand, I guess, how some of that feedback was incorporated, if I may. And look, sorry, apologies in advance, bear with me. We've had over 2,000 pages of information since Friday, so if I've missed something and it's incorporated, I apologise in advance. I'm just reading some of the responses from submissions, and one in particular stood out to me on page 35 of the council report. The submitter said, and I'll just read it, it's short, so just bear with me. It says, the contribution that landowners have as guardians of their resources. Landowners are also kaitiaki. Currently, the strategy treats landowners and land occupiers as people whose safety and well-being simply needs protecting, yet landowners and landowner occupiers also want to be involved in how their resources are managed and allocated. And I guess potentially what they're saying is that they see themselves as kaitiaki as well, and not to be excluded from that. So how was that taken in when staff have read the responses and incorporated that into the feedback? And then I've got a couple of follow-up questions.
I think it's already included in the values. We've mirrored the Te Reo values with the English translation or version of it. So I think there was never any intention to alienate, other property owners in this discussion. We're still committed to working with property owners, and there will be lots of opportunities, as I say, following on from this process around what the community wants in terms of obviously the long-term planning process, how much is the community willing to pay for some of this stuff? What is their levels of service going forwards? And there's all sorts of opportunities in terms of care groups. And I suppose the Wellington Regional Council's Whaitua process starts soon, which is community-led. So yeah, I don't know whether I've rambled a bit, so it probably doesn't.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks, Rita. Look, there was, you just touched on the Whaitua process. The comments around that came out through a number of the submitters as well. And it kind of goes back to the point that Councillor Holborough made, or Deputy Mayor Holborough, and your response as well, Rita, around the educational aspect involved in that. So will some of that stuff be picked up, and there's an opportunity to help people understand those aspects of, I guess it goes on to my second question, was that a number of the responses to the questions from submitters were actually questions themselves. And I appreciate that there's a resource involved in responding to that, but how do you deal with that? Because the risk is that people disengage from council processes if they provide responses and then don't feel they've been heard because they don't get a reply, when they've asked questions, wanting to genuinely know and be involved in the process.
I have gone back to at least one of the submitters who just had a range of questions for us. So because there's only 30, it's actually possible to actually just go back and have a conversation with them.
Yeah, thank you. And I did think the smaller number made that easier. My last one is just around, and I've raised this before in previous pieces of work that we've done, and apologies if it was included and I haven't seen it. But just around, there was feedback from submitters also around translating from Te Reo through to English. And in previous plans and strategies that we've done, I've asked that we have a page in there around some of those translations. And from my perspective, I think it's a beautiful opportunity to educate people in the reo and also the meaning behind some of that as well. So I'll just leave that with you. But certainly I'd love that council plays a role in educating our community around the Te Ao Māori worldview and the reo as well.
Kia ora, James. It's interesting that you've raised that because, there's the number of questions that you've raised and the discussion around te reo and kaitiakitanga in particular. Obviously, what we've done in this instance is just to restrict, I suppose, the definition of kaitiakitanga to the context in which it is set. I think if councillors and the public want to refer to documents that iwi have collectively already written before, there is Te Haringa Whakamua where there is full definitions around kaitiakitanga and how it relates to water, how it relates to infrastructure, how it relates to other aspects. So I think there are currently resources within council that exist that all three of the iwi have endorsed that we can call upon to help in that education space as well.
Fantastic suggestion, Caleb, and potentially we could link, to those papers that you refer to through the final version.
Thanks, James. That's great. Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Madam Chair, and some really good conversations around all this as well, and generally very, very supportive of where we're going with this. I just had some things I wanted to touch on, and some of it's just in wording and interpretations of. First of all, I just wanted to refer to page number 10 on page 20, which talks to the vision. And it talks to council works in partnership with tangata whenua to give expression to te mana o te wai. I was wondering, in this context, what's the difference between tangata whenua and mana whenua as such? Am I splitting hairs with this? The reason I say that is that I know mana whenua, I've sort of taken it to usually mean the iwi relationship, the local relationship, tangata whenua usually being a broader relationship.
We might be here for some time.
Yeah, and I think within the NPSFM, I think it talks to tangata whenua.
Yeah.
Mana whenua, obviously the people on the land currently. Tangata whenua can also refer to people who have been on the land that are no longer here. So in this context, it's really talking to what's in the NPSFM, so
Okay.
there's consistency of language.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I just was wondering whether it was being used to just create a broader term.
I'd much prefer mana whenua.
I had a general question here. It was around number 32, 33, it's around page 24. But it was just talking about how do we really respond to submitters' issues with regards to timeframes and agility in terms of the three waters. And I guess this is maybe more going to Sean with regard to this, is that LG&Z are asking for a stage approach to how stormwater is potentially integrated as such into that process. Are we in some ways here setting the groundwork from I guess is that one thing. Are we doing business as usual and keeping moving through with regards to that as per what we're doing with our water assets? And I guess around this, are we really setting a bit of a framework that gives us a strong advocacy point leading into perhaps how we engage in the stormwater space with the proposed entities that are being set up?
So yes to both of those. So yes, we are moving forward. The timeframes that we're talking about, this will be, hopefully, if it's resolved today, will be embedded well in advance of that transition through to the new entities, and certainly does set us up from the district's perspective anyway, to ensure that the hard work that's been done to get to this point is then embedded into a framework in our asset management planning and future potentially LTP that we'll also be looking at in advance of that final transition, and some of the options and the alternatives that Rita talked about in terms of managing stormwater would then be looked at embedded in that document as well. I mean, I don't know in terms of where that might end up with the LG&Z's view or some comments around stormwater remaining. Stormwater has always was the last sort of element to the three waters that was included. Initially, it wasn't proposed. So, and there are a number of issues that relate to stormwater, how you manage that, land use management, and the overarching links to transport and a number of other things that make it a bit more complicated. So, yeah, I don't know where that might end up, whether they will look at making some changes there, but that won't change what we're proposing today. Or, as you've said, it will certainly help, I think, the district to be better placed within that new entity with this framework in place.
Cool, thank you for that. I've got just a general question here. I've got a couple more questions as well. Look, we talk about stormwater adaptation mitigation, weather events, i.e. water coming out of the sky or water coming in land, but where does the change in water tables generally fit into all this? Because that must impact stormwater as well, obviously. But we're already noticing changes. It's been an allusion to Peka Peka in regards to those water tables, but also even with regards to developers, say, raising land next door to other people, whereas that water is then going into sections next door as such. How do we address those sort of issues?
I suppose groundwater is an ongoing discussion. This year's been particularly wet. We didn't have a very good summer, and it's been followed by a lot of rain, and we've forecast it's going to continue. We've had this before a couple of years ago when groundwater levels stayed high for 8 months, I think. It does get tricky in this space. You can't really pump groundwater too effectively. You've got to have somewhere to pump it to, and if everything's up. So it's I suppose it's a theme of work, and the new flood hazard maps will incorporate groundwater and the influence of climate change on that groundwater horizon. So,
I guess it's just a general guidance. Are we noticing more issues, or are those issues starting to turn up a little bit more regularly than what they have in the past?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Number 44 talks to Greater Wellington Regional Council. I was just curious, how is our relationship, or how's Council's relationship with them as such? And feel free to be circumspect.
Sorry. Sean should answer this. During this process, we had members of the Whaitua people come from Greater Wellington come to this, working on the Stormwater Management Framework. So they are very aware. I suppose, yeah, the relationship has its moments.
Speak. It's good to note that here probably that we have a good working relationship across both of these organisations, and we regularly find ourselves in that interface between district and regional council. I know that there are some aspects, so with Te Mana o Te Wai, with monitoring effects of stormwater on the natural environment, there are monitoring plans on the table at the moment with the Kapiti Coast District Council and the Wellington Regional Council are very interested on how that plays out, because that also feeds into their monitoring framework as well. So there is some collaboration there and joint interest in how the Stormwater Management Framework will work in achieving their goals as well. So they're, I think, quite on board with how this has been formulated.
Okay. One of the things that sort of came out through some of the submissions, there's a lot of forward thinking here with regards to things, but was around existing communities and how they looked after. It talks about new communities being planned as such, but we've also got obviously our existing communities as well. And in the vision, I was just curious to know where that's picked up. I noticed on Vision 3 you talk to the operational maintenance, upgrade and renewal of our network. Is that sort of maintenance aspect the part that sort of talks to the here and now as such, or gives us that looking at the here and now?
Yes, that was added for that reason, just to make sure that it's embedded in the vision, and the changes to the clause 4, because we like communities are thoughtfully planned, are protected from flooding to an agreed service level. Just change that tense to current so that it picks up the existing.
Lovely, okay. And look, last, and sorry to be a little bit contentious here, some of the people talk to not understanding co-governance, or the word co-governance, and it was interesting, it was raised at the Te Marata Hui at LGNZ that we're wondering whether the phrase co-governance is perhaps not the right word with regards to the relationships that we have with our iwi partners as such. I notice on page 29, which I've taken out, no I don't. On 29, number 3 talks to the power to make decisions is shared by council and tangata whenua and with the support of the community. That's sort of a little bit, sorry, just to bear with me here for a second. Number 41 says that first it's important to note the Stormwater Steering Group is an advisory group that makes recommendations to council. So there's a little bit of contradictory with regards to recommendations being made, but then it being stated that that's a shared decision with council. I could see that would lead to confusion, if you like.
You're right. The advisory, I suppose advisory in that the members of that committee go back to their respective iwi as well. Yeah.
Okay, no, I just wanted to bring that up. That was all. That was just, I think we've got issues with regards to...
yeah, could have been worded better.
Yeah. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. We've got Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to ask probably a bit more detail, Rita, in relation to, you were talking that, I think you mentioned there was something about there's some mapping going on, which would include groundwater and maybe flooding. I'm just wondering whether that process will be consulted on with our communities, or that process, or basically how's that process going to occur before that work is completed, please?
The way it normally works, we rebuild the flood hazard models, which we're doing. There's not really anything to consult on during that process. It's technical, And once we get to a point where the models are working and we have an output, then that's the time when we go out to communities. The model, our models, only model the extent of our urban drainage network. So some areas within the Kapiti Coast aren't covered by our flood hazard modelling. They are, however, covered by Greater Wellington Regional Council's groundwater model, and sometimes their flood hazard models, depending on where it is.
Yeah, I think that would be more about engaging and presenting that information to the community, similar to the work we've been doing on the coastal space. I guess it's providing that information and engaging and informing, and that's where we'd also look to work through some of the issues in the document here around education as part of that process.
Thank you, both of you. So obviously there's two components to that, or two agencies who are working, and I assume together on this. So the models will include both the stance from KCDC as well as from GW. Is that correct?
We've included Greater Wellington Regional Council's groundwater model in our model. We have included the major river systems are modelled by Greater Wellington Regional Council, and we do have conversations around combining those two, but it's quite difficult because they're kind of from different perspectives and purposes.
Right.
And then there's also the groundwater model that covers the whole of the district. And climate change.
Okay, thank you. And what time frame are we looking at for this?
I'm not sure about Greater Wellington's. The groundwater model is available. They had Donkin and Taylor, I think, redo it recently for the Whaitua process, ahead of the Whaitua process. And our models, the rebuild should be done for all our catchments at the end of August, and then we will start a process of scenario testing and just sensitivity testing. So model outputs will be available later in the year for discussion. Okay, thank you. So with the GW modelling being completed, is that available on their website, do you know? I wouldn't have, maybe not, I wouldn't have thought so, but you could ask, there's groundwater scientists. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jocelyn. I don't see any further questions. So can we have the recommendations up on the screen so we can see the additions to the recommendation A2 number 4, please. There we have it there. So the addition is the communities are thoughtfully planned, protected from flooding to an agreed level of service and resilience to anticipate climate change impacts. And do we need the and on the end there? Oh, no, sorry, it's a 2.4. I think. 2.4 is okay. No, we need to get rid of the end, don't we? Oh.
Sorry, okay. Sorry, I just, yeah.
So I would add a new clause and the addition. We'll put that and the modification of in there.
And fourth clause.
Yeah, and division.
Okay.
Sorry for the delay. We've just got some administrative issues going on.
And did we want the and back at the end?
Or do you need to specify that you'll change the wording, then you should specify from the other ones the changes you made? Is it, so for A24, is it change the form? Vision statement number 4, I'm not quite sure how to do that.
Can we just add something in?
Yeah, but we've got to know what the amendment actually is, because it's not saying where it applies. So we say we reorder the outcomes before that. It's a minor amendment, it's an addition, but we don't actually specify what we were applying to communities of all. That makes sense.
I have no idea.
So my understanding was the A.2 reflects 8.21, 2, 2, 3, or 4 amendments that have been made based on feedback. I'm not sure why you need 8.21 that repeats that addition of a new clause. But that just probably overly complicates things. Maybe Rita, you're best.
Okay, so the first 2.1 is the addition of the new clause and the modification of the 4th clause in the vision. So that's that first section. And then 2 is a minor amendment to the 6th value to just reword it so that the community is sort of beginning. And then the third one is to reorder the outcomes. So those 3 are... It's amendment to
the vision for stormwater management. That's a regular service.
Yes, I've just added.
Yeah.
You're right. That last one is modification of clause 4.
Yeah. Which is picked up by the.
So you could get rid of it on clause 1, the one. Oh, it doesn't matter. We'll just leave it. Okay. Oh.
Okay, it looks like we're happy with the recommendations that are now up on the screen. Jocelyn, I noticed that you've still got your hand up. Did you want to contribute something, or is that just left over from your previous questioning?
Basically, in the document we have before us here today, so we have quite nicely laid out the vision with the amendments, the values with an amendment, and the outcomes with an amendment. And so this recommendation before us wraps all that up into 4 bullet points, or 5 bullet points. And I'm not totally convinced that everything is being included in there, or whether the wording is actually correct.
What's happened? It's my fault. The draft appendix 1 is correct. What I didn't do when I changed it in the body of the report is I didn't actually change the recommendation at the front. So what you're looking in terms of that nicely set out appendix 1 is correct, and it hasn't changed from that. What I didn't do is the clause 2.1, I should have added after a new clause and modification of clause 4. So it's the same, only I didn't do it at the front end.
Yeah, because I suppose, yeah.
Okay, so we'll ask for a mover of the recommendation in its entirety.
We've got Councillor Holborough.
Sorry, Councillor Holborough.
Yeah, you asked for a mover, so I put my hand up to move it.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. We'll take you as the mover, and we'll take Councillor Compton as the seconder. Now we'll go into debate.
Yeah, I'm very happy with these recommendations and a great discussion that's happened today, and congratulations to the team on the work so far and to the whole of the Stormwater team, really. So much work has gone into prioritising and working on how we can address the huge problem that is stormwater in our district. And it's an ongoing piece of work, hugely complex, hugely expensive. And I think we're in a really good place with understanding what the issues are, where they are, and starting to understand what our community understands about stormwater in our district. Also, huge thanks again to Caleb and to the other iwi who've been involved in this process. It's a wonderful document in the way that Te Ao Māori and Tikanga Māori are embedded into the principles and into the document as a whole. So congratulations to the team, and very happy to commend this.
Thank you, Janet. Gwyn?
Yeah, so just further to Councillor Holbrough's points there, I think just to illustrate the scale of the challenge that's obviously going to be only increasing in the stormwater space, just thinking back to, I think, 3 of the last 4 constituent inquiries I've had have actually related to stormwater issues that are cropping up. And, you know, in large part, we've got this horrendous nexus at the moment of a stormwater system that is nearing capacity and is under pressure, but then we've got climate change driving even more frequent heavy rain events, and as was noted earlier, in terms of the impact on groundwater, especially when we don't have a nice long summer to dry things out. So, you know, you've definitely got your work cut out for you in the space going forward, especially with all the other big changes coming, whether it's 3 waters, whether it's urban intensification and everything else, essential freshwater. It's it's going to be a little bit of a busy space, and you're looking horrified for a second, but no, I think it's an exciting space too, because you can make some pretty big changes to the way that we actually manage and restore the health of our environment as well.
Councillor Hemford.
Yeah, total for those comments, and we'd just like to thank the team for, as I think it was Councillor Holbrough mentioned, the extensive engagement and really proactive engagement, like seeing you down at the market and delivering some of the flyers and just being there to see the team out on their weekends. Just, you know, it needs to be acknowledged, because you probably had some hard conversations as well on those weekends, and it's a sacrifice that you're making, but a real contribution to the mahi. So thank you. And just acknowledging some of the questions that came up through the time that we've just had, that last kind of half hour or so, around using this as a real opportunity to help to educate our community about the value of, and not only the need to, but the value of co-governance and the value of ensuring that mana whenua and tangata whenua, in this case as well, as it's been recognised, are truly partners in this mahi. And so the fact that we can help to educate our community, it's not just a need with Te Mano Te Wai and with the legislative requirements that come alongside that, that it's an opportunity. And so I look forward to hopefully bringing our community along with us on that journey and helping to bridge that gap. And also, just as Councillor Compton has mentioned, with climate impacts and our ability to build resilience through the mahi that's already happening, but also that is being begun through having this framework. Looking forward to seeing how our community again can be brought along on that journey and continue to be educated about the fact that climate change is here, it's now, and it's not just a future kind of issue that the next generation will have to deal with. It's actually something that, especially in this moment, it's becoming more and more real. With every weather event that we've got on our doorstep, and our community, I think, is starting to wake up to that. So it's an important piece of comms, but also an important piece of kind of infrastructure by way of a framework that will help to hopefully make the journey a bit easier for our community, but help to wake them up to the realities and the need to mitigate as well. So just again, thanks for your mahi.
Thanks, Sophie. And we've got Martin Halliday.
Through you, Madam Chair. Look, I just, again, wanted to thank, I'm not going to add a whole heap of stuff because I think everyone's covered everything. It just amazes me that you have all this work beforehand and it's summarised on one sheet of paper, I think, which is fantastic. But it emphasises, it lays the foundation for so much more work going forward. But it's so important that we are dealing with this. I very much like that we are putting that groundwork in place that allows us. We've talked previously around how we're going to interact with the three waters and everything. So we're putting some good frameworks in place that allows good advocacy the avenue for good advocacy moving forward for our district, that covers all the values that our community wants to see. So I'm looking forward to seeing it all coloured in wonderful ways. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your supportive comments, everybody. So we've got a right of reply from Janet. No, she's going to waiver that. Okay, we'll put it to the vote. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against? So that's carried. And thank you so much for your really hard work and a lot more hard work to press on with by the look of it.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you.
Thanks. So we've been trucking along for just on a couple of hours now. So I think we should probably just take a 10-minute break and we'll see you back at 5 to 12.